And I want to thank everybody for joining us today for the TAM Book Club series. Again, the TAM Book Club series is back. The last time we did this was a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. This is our second book club meeting. And our topic today is on TAMP implementation and integration. We have 6 more webinars planned over the next, I think, 7 or 8 weeks. Our next club meeting will be next Wednesday, May 5th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. That topic is going to be on lifecycle planning and management.
So they're the same exact one, or are they different brand, or what?
That's the same one, just different.
Hang on. Got to all right. Sorry, Ed. Got a little distracted there. If you want to, not if you want to mute. If you want to find or register, if you want to register for any of the upcoming webinars, you can go to the TAM portal, tam-portal.com. You can also find previous recordings of all the webinars that we have done. And a lot of other information. Again, as I said last week, the TAM portal has been sort of revamped and updated. I think you can access information a lot better now. Again, tam-portal.com. A lot of good resources. And the TAM guide that we're going to be using today and over the next 6 weeks, for the next 6 webinars, you can access that directly at tamguide.com. And if you're from the state DOT, you should have received a sort of online PDF version, which you can, in theory, download and print out. So it's more of a traditional printed version. And you can, if you have trouble accessing that through your state DOT, let me know, and I can put you in touch with the person who sort of handles the AASHTO publications for your agency. If you're with us last week, you know that we had some capacity issues. Our V over C ratio was definitely greater than 1. And we have hopefully addressed that this week. We've upgraded the infrastructure, paid more money. So we should avoid those sort of load management issues, get down to, V over C ratio of less than 1, a level of service B, maybe an A, however you want to refer to it from your performance management perspective. And finally, if you do have any questions at all during today's webinar, please use the Zoom chat functionality. We are monitoring that. You can send us individual chats, or you can do it to the entire group if you have something to share. A link to something that your state, your agency, you've done, please, sharing is caring, as we go back to what we learned in kindergarten. And with that, I want to turn it over to my good friend, Steve Gay from FHWA, one of our the co-sponsors of this webinar series. And with that, Steve, it's all yours.
Thank you. There, Matt. It's proud to be a co-sponsor of these webinars. Today's webinar focusing on TAM implementation, and I think I'm really excited about it. And we're going to hear from several people to give their perspective of it. And I think, we have many state asset management leads participating in the webinar. I think it's great to get familiar with this manual that I think it was quite a bit of effort to put together. I think we certainly learned a lot. I guess this TAMP guide number 3 for AASHTO, and just getting better and better. And for those not from state DOTs, local agencies, transit, MPOs, I think this series will be very beneficial to understand the principles of asset management for your entire system. Other owners of the NHS work with their state DOT. I think this provides valuable background on what, where, why, how they're doing what they're doing, and how you have a role in it. But even for smaller agencies, they're just managing the network. I believe participating in this webinar series will be quite valuable. I'm really looking forward to today's session and listening in the breakout groups, etc. Next week, webinar is going to focus on life cycle planning and management. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Yana Park of Spy Pond and Gareth McKay of WSP. Yana?
Thanks, Steve. So I'm just going to go over the agenda for today's webinar, and we just had the introduction from Matt and Steve. And then Then Gareth McKay from WSP, who is part of our team that developed the TAM guide, is going to give a topic introduction as well as some Menti polls. And then we will get some use case scenarios from Jack Moran from Massachusetts DOT, Matt Hobrook from Iowa DOT, and Meredith Hill from Maryland DOT SHA. And then after they're finished, we will then move on to the quests. This is where we'll be kind of randomly distributed to breakout sessions, and then we'll work together. And hope with the digital guide working, we will have our contest and we'll search the guide and also have some discussion about what we're looking at and what it might mean to each of us who are part of the breakouts. And then we'll come back and provide some feedback on the breakout quests and the guide itself. And then we will end with a discussion, Q&A, and then just a wrap up about what's coming up in the next set of webinars. So throughout, just use the chat function to ask questions, and everyone can speak up. So just when it comes time to have the discussion, just unmute yourself if you want to contribute to the conversation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gareth McKay, who is the lead facilitator for this webinar.
Thank you, Fiona, and good afternoon, everybody. The focus of our session today is implementation and integration. We're going to use this slide you can see in front of us and this diagram that comes from chapter 2 of the TAM guide as a basis for the introduction I'm going to run through today. And one of the reasons I like this diagram, because I think it encompasses a lot. It encompasses a great number of the elements that are included within a TAMP, all the way from overall objectives through alignment with other policies and implementation. And today I'm going to talk about TAMP, and I'm also going to talk about our TAM policies and our TAM processes. And I'm going to use those terms sort of interchangeably. I think that our TAMP is one of those documents we use to communicate those policies and processes, and that's really delivering and implementing those processes that makes us successful in achieving those outcomes from our TAMP. Next slide, please, Perry. Thank you. The first part of the diagram I want to focus on is strategic alignment. And what this is really about is integrating TAM and our TAMP with the strategy and the overall objectives of an organization. Each agency will have a mission and vision and objectives they want to achieve. A lot of them will be around mobility and safety and benefits to the economy. And it's really important that TAM and our TAMP understands the role that it has in terms of delivering those overall objectives for an organization. The other important part from a strategic alignment perspective is alignment with other policies and integration with those policies. So again, it's important from a TAM and TAMP perspective that we understand the role of how we integrate with other policies, whether those be long-range transportation plans, safety policies, etc. And again, what is the role that TAM has in terms of delivering those outcomes? On the next slide, we're going to focus a little bit more in terms of implementation. So we've got our TAM processes in place. We've written the TAMP, and what's really important here is implementing the objectives that we wanted to achieve. So a lot of times they can be defined by performance measures and targets, but they need to be delivered and implemented by a lot more than just the asset management person or small group within an organization. It requires help and input from planning and programming and those responsible for day in, day out delivery. It's important that we can communicate to those to all those individuals. We also monitor progress. And with the next slide, we're going to shift into taking that monitoring and being able to use that monitoring to make adjustments to what we do. And this is really important from an implementation perspective. The sort of cheesy buzzword is continuous improvement, but whether it's delivering those asset management outcomes, we need to be able to adjust. We need to be able to monitor and adjust and make changes. Maybe that might be changes to our decision making or even changes to our processes to make sure that people are in the position to make good decisions. But also from an adjustment perspective, we need to understand, continue to reassess that integration part of it. So there may be changes in leadership within our agency, there may be changes in policy, and perhaps less so in objectives. But we need to continue to understand how TAM helps deliver that, make adjustments when necessary, think about when that requires updates to our TAMP or our TAM processes. So as we're undertaking all this, on the next slide, we've just got considering two sort of important pieces of this. And it's not just two, there's a lot of different elements to this. But when we're implementing TAM and our TAMP, within an agency, there are a vast amount of internal stakeholders. That's everything from the leadership who might make decisions on funding and how funding is split, all the way through to and including those that make decisions on an annual or even a daily basis in terms of the activities that are undertaken. All are important in terms of implementing our TAMP. The other bit that is, the other part of it that's very important is those outside the organization. So for the TAMP process, the federal TAMP process, it's a requirement to include all the assets on the national highway, all the pavements and bridges on national highway system. And so that requires most to differing degrees to work with external stakeholders, not just to exchange information, but also to think about how decisions are made in terms of delivering those outcomes, delivering the targets, and integrating decision making with them. And we'll touch on that a little bit further as we move along. The important thing when we consider all of these stakeholders is, and to make implementation successful, is how we communicate with them. So on the next slide, we have another extract from chapter 2 of the guide, and it talks about some of the things we need to consider when we communicate. And this is really about how do we make our implementation or our adjustments or our integration successful. And it's really about considering those stakeholders, considering how they are different, considering the actions we want them to take. So why are we communicating with them? How are they different? And what is the best way for us to get the message across, to share with them their place within the processes we want to implement, and how important it is that they help, not just from a TAM perspective, but from an overall integrated organization perspective, achieve the objectives that everybody wants to achieve. Right, so that's a bit of an introduction. And we're going to dive into some of these elements a little bit further. And we're going to start off by doing a Menti poll. And we've got a number of questions here. So if everybody could start off by going to menti.com and using the code that's on the screen there to start that process. The first question is about areas of TAM integration and which of those are a strength within your agency or an agency that you know well. And so there's a number of different areas there. So is TAM, your TAMP or your TAM processes well integrated with planning and programming, with performance management? There'll be performance management parts of your TAM processes. Are those well integrated with other parts of other performance management aspects? From a risk management perspective, is your TAMP risk process well integrated with broader enterprise or project level risk management processes? And from an information management perspective, there is information that is used to information that is used to inform the TAMP and make decisions within a TAMP, but is that information also available to others when they need it to be able to make informed decisions? So thank you for jumping in and starting this. I can see that planning and performance is coming out well ahead at the moment, but there is a distribution across there. So I think a clear area there where we see some strength in terms of that alignment, and it looks as though risk management is perhaps less so for most organizations, and perhaps that's something to consider moving forward. Okay, we've got about half the group has responded, so that's pretty good. The next question is probably even more challenging, so we'll see how we get on with that one too. The second question is about integration, and one of the challenges, you can free form into this one, and it's really about what are the challenges your agency or agencies you know well or work with face when wanting to include other asset owners as part of the TAMP process or in the TAMP itself. And those challenges could be around information management, information transfer, and that's not just about asset condition. It could be about sharing financial information. It could be about sharing decision making. But also from an implementation perspective, there can be some challenges around buying into targets and performance targets that you set. And also there's some, it can be around how you make decisions to achieve those targets. So thank you. We've got a lot of responses coming in there. It seems dry and hard to understand. Hopefully we can talk about that a little bit more when we think about communication. But there's a lot of things there. I mean, I think this is an area that is challenging. I think it is an area that probably those that have been through the TAMP process have identified, seen what's easy and hard about this process, and some have put a lot of effort into it, and hopefully they've seen some benefit of it. But there's a lot of good information there, so thank you for sharing that, and we'll have a summary of this available after the session. Okay, the next question is about communication, and this is about who is the audience for your TAMP, and this could be different for different agencies, and I would expect it to be so. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay if you have different folks who you think your TAMP is targeted at. I think the most important thing here is that you recognize who it is. Who is that audience? And when you're drafting or preparing your TAMP or and thinking about how it's going to be implemented, make sure that the messages get across to the right people. Who needs to understand the challenges? Who needs to understand the risks? Who needs to understand the objectives and how those are going to be achieved and how you're going to make decisions? And it's really important that we think about that and make sure that message gets across. The TAMP is one communication piece. There are a number of other ways, and it's likely that you'll need more than just a TAMP to successfully implement and get people making the right decisions to deliver your TAMP. So not surprisingly, FHWA is very high on that, but we're also seeing some really high numbers for leadership. And also internal stakeholders, and so that's good to see. And I expect if we're talking FHWA, agency leadership, and also internal stakeholders, it's highly likely that there'd be different types of communication that would be necessary for at least some of those parties. And good to see that some see it as a communication tool for the public as well, and politicians to help educate them. So thank you for that. Okay, we're now going to go through some use case scenarios, and we're going to hear from Jack Moran, Matt Halbrick, and Meredith Hill, who are going to share some insights in terms of, for them as practitioners, some of what they have done in terms of implementation and alignment, and also what they hope to do in terms of going through the process in the future. So first up, we have Jack. Thank you, Jack, and over to you.
Thank you, Gareth. Good afternoon, everyone. Very thankful to learn today and provide a small contribution to the webinar. So like all DOTs, we at MassDOT are currently work planning this first update to our transportation asset management plan. And I believe one of our initial efforts will be to reflect on how well the TAMP was aligned or supported the organizational strategy we have at MassDOT, so as to help us maybe better align it or improve upon the first iteration. So at MassDOT, I think one foundational element with respect to our first TAMP was it came almost right after a major restructuring of our capital investment plan. And that process itself it set the framework for us to align that to the TAMP, bring the TAMP into a place that had some logic and strategy underneath it. So fundamentally, the CIP was structured so that we had the clear categories of modernization, reliability, and expansion. And then within each one of these priorities would be various programs of investment that align with that upper level priority. So at MassDOT, we consider state of good repair to be within the realm of reliability, which is a little bit of a conflict in definitions with the PM3 realm. But that said, for us, reliability really is state of good repair. So in developing our TAMP, it set us up so that we would, by focusing on bridges and pavements with this first iteration, we would kind of provide that gap, serve that gap that goes from our reliability strategy at the top level to our capital investment plan by way of the TAMP, outlining investment strategies, outlining our project selection processes, all of the processes that go involved in it, and therefore supporting that capital investment plan directly. And I think in retrospect, over the last 4 years, we can see that was successful in real terms because we were able to secure additional funding for pavement and bridge in the manner that we hope to by our TAMP. So I think that's a good sign, but that's not to say that we did not have some or recognize some deficiencies in the TAMP in further aligning with our strategies at MassDOT. So if we go to the next slide, I can just talk about a few of those. Namely, us being in transportation mobility is a central strategy. And at MassDOT, really, the word mobility has been very much equated to an adaptation of our legacy infrastructure where it makes sense to promote bicycle pedestrian trips in a safe manner. We really didn't get into that at all in the TAMP. And one challenge with that is much of those investments will entail expansion, which is somewhat of a departure from that lane that we were in that reliability zone. However, because bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, it's an asset, and we need to take it into account from a road and bridge perspective. It does seem like there is a need for us to better manage those asset classes, and I feel like the TAMP is the natural place to do it. So that's something we'll be focused on. Another instance of where we may have fell short a bit is just in the kind of growing arena of resiliency, where we primarily focused on that concept in our risk register, our risk section. But I think that maybe having fully embracing that concept, whether within existing programs of investment or standalone programs, will be something we'll be looking at for this next TAMP, because we are certainly looking at that at an agency level. And then finally, just safety. there's a big asset component to safety. And I think that, again, trying to make the TAMP relevant in this next iteration, looking at how asset management can support safety goals will be another key area that we'll be focused on. So essentially that's what I wanted to share with you all today. These are the things that we're kind of thinking about at the outset, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. Thanks, Gareth.
Thank you, Jack. Thanks very much. We're now going to go to Matt Halbrick. So I think we're going to transfer and give Matt control of things at the moment, and then Matt will jump in. And thank you, Matt.
Thank you. Are you good? I hope you're seeing my screen. Looks like
We've got you. You sound good. Thanks.
okay, great. Yeah, so wanted to just share a little bit of history, I guess, of kind of where Iowa DOT came to look at this this issue of kind of how we align our asset management plan with other plans. So I'll just, quick bit of background about our first asset management plan. We had a steering committee that we put together in mid 2014. So this was prior to the kind of almost to the rulemaking process to develop an asset management plan in that time frame, kind of getting ahead a little bit. So when when we talk about our initial TAMP, it was actually prior to, we had a TAMP before the initial TAMP that was required by Federal Highway. We actually completed that in fall of 2016, just about a week or so after the rules became final and became regulation. So that TAMP was never really intended to meet all the federal requirements, but rather to really kind of help us learn and grow. And so along with the gap analysis that was done around the same time, it really led us to be thinking about how the TAMP really should fit in with our overall processes, and had the opportunity to kind of sit down with me and a group of really smart folks in our agency, sit down and kind of start to sketch this out a little bit. So we started with this basic question: where does this TAM governance and TAM structure kind of fit in the overall big picture as we're thinking about how we develop our processes? And so, starting with the TAMP, we sort of said, well, honestly, it kind of fits over here onto the side. We've got this this idea. Oh, I'm hearing the slide is only partially available. Are you guys able to see my slide?
I can see it fine, Matt.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks, we see the full slide.
Yep.
Okay. Good. So in this diagram, you can see the asset management plan really is kind of off to the side a little bit. And our guiding principle is really in our long range plan. And this diagram was one that we put together back in, you can see it's this draft is from March of 2015 to really help us think about or kind of diagram out how these plans relate to each other, how the long range plan is informed by our strategic plan, our agency mission. Of course, those are all just some of the inputs to the long range plan, but certainly important ones. And then how it ultimately all culminates in what we call our 5-year program, which is kind of a more complete version of a STIP, at least for the highway program side, or actually includes it's multimodal, but is focused on DOT business. So you can think of that 5-year program in the lower right hand corner as kind of equivalent to a STIP. And so we sort of tried to flow chart this out. How would all these pieces start to fit together? So, we zoom in here on the long range plan. Again, that is informed by the agency's sort of strategic vision. And then, like I said, it culminates in that 5-year program or that STIP. And that's first kind of goes through a management level approval and then is ultimately approved by our citizen commission that oversees and authorizes the projects and programs that are going to be funded in the coming year, the next 5 years. So that was a version of the initial version of that diagram. in a very similar form ended up in our current long range plan, which was approved in 2017. And again, kind of lays out this relationship between the long range plan, other specialized system and modal plans, how we select projects, and really about how the asset management plan is really informing a lot of the decisions along the way. But it's not, as you all know, the asset management plan doesn't list projects. So some of these other kinds of plans will list specific projects or specific needs, let's say, that will become projects. That's not what the TAMP does. The TAMP informs the context for those and helps us kind of think about translating that long range vision from the long range plan, the 25, 30-year vision forward into more of a 10-year focus that'll give us that result in a list of projects for that 5-year time window. So that's what I wanted to share. It's one of the nice things about our current schedule is that we have an update to our long range plan that's also happening at the same time, and we're having some good synergy between, much as Jack mentioned from MassDOT's perspective, some good synergy between thinking about our updates to our long range plan and how that's going to be reflected and impact the TAMP and vice versa. So definitely excited to see how that comes together.
Thank you, Matt, and so much appreciated. So Jack and Matt have talked a little quite a bit there about integration of their TAMP and TAM with strategic objectives and other policies. And now we're going to change tact a little bit, and we've got a little video here from Meredith Hill that's going to talk about implementation of TAM and the processes used to achieve it.
When I was growing up in Connecticut, my directionally challenged Massachusetts mom tasked my Oklahoma dad to provide driving directions to my friend's parents. This rarely went well. Dad knew state-numbered routes and north, south, east, west directionality. New Englanders are used to historically named roads meandering past 4 white church landmarks through many municipalities and changing names along the way. This was a perfect storm for lost in translation and the burbs. My parents had a communications plan, but it didn't adjust to the audience and context. This is what I will focus on today with you, tools to support a nimble communications strategy. Hello, I'm Meredith Hill, Chief of Innovative Planning and Performance for the Maryland DOT State Highway Administration. My team is responsible for data visualization and information sharing to communicate our performance, asset, and risk management story, both internally and externally. I'm going to move quickly through some products and tools that we use to collaborate with our partners, which you can explore on your own. Then I will end by connecting the guidance available in the TAM guide to communication strategies my team employs every day. So let's get started. We communicated risk-based asset management through the TAMP for the benefit of all 16 partner owners in Maryland. We visualize a risk to our system and individual assets from sea level rise, storm surge, and nuisance flooding through the M.SHA Climate Change Vulnerability Viewer. And we monitor and communicate the performance of our roadway segments, corridors, and systems through the Mr. Pat tool. I encourage you to explore those tools, but in the interest of time here today, I'm going to try to connect my strategies to the practical guidance available in the TAM guide. My communications plan is constantly changing as I learn more, listen more, and engage more people. We produced a short video to define asset management and TAM basics for a general audience. Our asset management executive summary communicates compliance with federal, state, and department regulations and policies, the value of the agency asset portfolio, and the 10-year financial plan to achieve and maintain a state of good repair for all 14 asset classes. When possible, put your champions, all of your champions, on film. This helps to communicate from the top down, bottom up, and peer-to-peer, and personalizes the message. And most importantly, family first. Often we spend a disproportionate amount of time communicating outward, and we forget to connect the agency people to their role in practice. They are essential for success and innovation, and they need to know that. You succeed and stumble together. The AASHTO portals and the TAM guide have a wealth of free resources from the community of practice that will help you connect with field workers, engineers, planners, executives, and everyone in between. I'm a planner who increasingly finds print documents and plans inefficient. The digital TAM guide is an excellent example of my preferred alternative. It's available on demand, easily updated, shared, and personalized with videos and stories. My preferred communications platform is ArcGIS Online applications. Every stage of our plan, invest, evaluate cycle is communicated through AGOL tools. While AGOL is not an enterprise asset management system, it does an excellent job of linking to decentralized systems to consistently visualize data and share information. AGOL is so much more than maps that even my mom can follow my work. As you explore chapters 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the TAM guide to learn more about performance, asset, and risk management practices, I encourage you to think early and often about how to communicate why you do what you do, who is involved and who can you engage. Share what you know and what you don't. You're not alone, and the TAM community connects you with those from whom you can rip off and duplicate. See Connecticut's asset fact sheets and my email address to follow if you wish to. And finally, share how performance, asset, and risk management helps your state achieve transportation goals established in your performance-based planning and programming plans. Thank you. Please visit the m.agol portal and connect with me and my team if we can be of assistance. I'll turn it back to you now.
Thank you, Jack, Matt, and Meredith for sharing your experiences and your thoughts on integration and implementation. We're now going to take a bit of a dive into the TAM guide and look in there to find opportunities for us to, guidance for us in terms of helping each agency as we go through trying to improve our processes and improve our implementation and integration. We're going to do another breakout into smaller groups, and we're going to work on an exercise to find some of that information within the TAM guide through what we term a quest. The intention of this exercise is to familiarize you with the guide and also to support you in terms of using it for your future needs. There's a list of questions that are up there, and I will, as soon as I'm done, I will post those again within the chat box so you can access those and also have access to the TAM guide. So let's just walk through how the breakout session assignment will work. You'll see from the questions up there, it's a little different to last week. There is the requirement for you to go and find the relevant area in the guide, but also a question for you as a group to discuss things a little bit further and discuss how that applies to you and your agency. In a minute, when we start the process, you will self-select a breakout group. A pop-up window will come up on your screen when it's time to go into breakouts. The number of people who are already in each breakout will show up next to that group. So please select a breakout group that has a lower number of people. You will have a facilitator in your session who will guide you through the exercise and use screen sharing to share the questions and enable you to insert some information about where that resource you found within the digital guide was, and also to put some brief notes in terms of the discussion that you had. You will have the opportunity at the start to think about how you as a team want to tackle this, whether you want to do it together as a group or do it separately and then come back together and discuss. There will be a winner of the quest, and that'll be judged based on the group that completed the most quests, the group that found the relevant resources, and also a completely unscientific assessment of the quality of your recording of your discussion and the notes that you take on that. So Hyuna and I will look at that, and the winners will be announced on the TAM webinar site on the TAM portal. When we return to the large group at the end of the breakout, we're going to ask you to share some of the feedback you have from using the guide. What did you find valuable? But really importantly, what are the areas where you think there could be more information? What would be helpful to you in terms of improving the value of the guide? And we're very keen to hear that and be able to build on the guide as we move forward. Okay, I will post those quest slides. We're going to go into a breakout room now. So please select your group and we'll get back together in about 30 to 40 minutes. I did get some feedback from my review that was done that there were too many questions. And so I'm glad to see that not taking that advice has cost me at the end of the day. So,
well, I think it was the combination of that discussion component. Once you start talking about it, it takes time, right?
it does, but we had, but I know,
we're good.
Yeah, and within our group we had some good discussion, and so that was beneficial.
Yeah,
I would argue that it's kind of analog to how you actually develop the TAMP. Is you fill in as many boxes as possible, and don't waste time discussing things. Just get those boxes filled as much as you can.
Let's see, William. How many have? Okay, we're all like
two and a half.
We were at 3.5.
Okay. And so I guess my question is, did we learn anything? Were there things that we liked that we found within the guide? Hopefully someone like us didn't just do the top, everyone didn't just do the top 2 questions or 2.5 questions. Is there anything that we found or saw within the guide that was useful or that we would have liked to have had more of? So perhaps, William, do you want to go first? You're the first one on my list.
Yeah, I'd say for the most part, my group had familiarity with the previous guide, as well as some had familiarity with this guide. I think that the ease of navigation and the search functionality worked well. That last half question, I think that was answered in about 10 seconds. So getting to the information and navigating to it is really easy. And the other thing that I point out is, one of the criticisms that we had with the previous guide was it covers a breadth of topics. The depth wasn't there, and it really wasn't a guide for practitioners. This one is. It lists out the things that you should consider, and you can have more substantive conversations from there.
Thank you, William. I'm going to go to Francis next.
So I had kind of a quiet group, but I think we got everybody so that some of the folks in my group hadn't ever opened the guide and didn't know how to get to it. So I consider it a major victory that now I think everybody who was in my group can get to this guide online, and that's great. And we learned how to search, use the search box and how to use the navigation on the left. And I think once people got the hang of it, they were able to quickly find the sections. We were trying to get through all 7, at least finding where they were. And so we didn't have too much time for substantive conversation about any of the topics. So we had to make that trade-off, but I think it worked pretty well.
Thank you, Francis. And yeah, we were struggling on one element, had to use that search engine, and it was very effective. So I would that's a sort of consistent message I'm hearing. Anne-Marie.
Yes, hi. So I thought it was a good discussion, and we were trying to get through the things. Luckily, we had David from Connecticut was locating things quickly and in many pieces. We had talked about policy, really neat. Jim Lewis from New Jersey was saying how now, having done a TAM, how you have to go back and see how it meets what you're doing because it was organizationally fit earlier on. Steve Gay was talking about how he's seeing resiliency, and we talked about maybe incorporating that in your policy and also in some of the risk aspects. Parisa is a PhD in Syracuse. Shout out to her because this is great to have PhD students using TAM and TAM Guide. And Yola Beth from an MPO. So they don't have a policy yet, but they're looking at this to try and implement things in that direction.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Bill, got you next on.
Yeah, our group, folks were able to get to the guide, and I know this because they were finding the sections faster than I was by the end. We did have a lot of good discussion about kind of what does it take to integrate TAM in agencies' organization, and folks really emphasized the change management aspect of it, which turns out there's a section on that. So it was reassuring to see that emphasized in the guide. And I think on some of the specific questions and points, people made suggestions about where maybe there are additional things that should ideally be considered that maybe weren't on that list of questions, but were nonetheless covered elsewhere in the guide. For instance, on the thinking about TAM and the integration in the TAM policy, making the connection to financial results, which is covered elsewhere in the guide, but just didn't appear there. And the idea of kind of demonstrating results from asset management up front and showing that connection and having that integrated in the integration and in the development of the policy would be examples of where folks brought in materials from other sections of the guide to help answer the question that was in the quest.
That's good. And so it's good to know that people could find those other bits, but perhaps the feedback there is how do we make it a simple and easy connection for those that are less adept at managing through the guide like I am. So that would be good. Thank you, Bill. Fiona.
All right, so we, on the first question, we did find two different places where we could answer it and found that they weren't 100% consistent, but we said, sometimes when we did the how-tos, it was from a certain perspective, and it just, I think, highlights that there's no one right answer to everything. I'm kind of curious how we're going to be by webinar 8, because the more you're familiar moving around, your tactics change in the search. And so I was finding that we were looking at the chapter outlines and going through that to find the things rather than using the search. I did want to have, Jasmine was making a very important comment when we got booted out. And so Jasmine, if you wanted to share your observation, we were talking about Quest 4 and the figure.
Sure. Yes, I was asking about one of the things that I'm sort of struggling is just high level, just the linkage between TPM and the TAMP. And I was saying that with the TPM reporting, that happens every 2 to 4 years, or however the reporting, the timing of it, I'm not familiar with, but it just seems so long and in between when there's just so much opportunity to report more frequently. And it seems that the TAMP consistency determination is just ideal to be able to, to have that linkage and report out on current data. But, it's not required. And but it's such a good opportunity. So I kind of wanted to hear what other people's thoughts were on that.
So I think, Jasmine, you're kind of suggesting that in the consistency review, that it's an opportunity to make a greater connection and look at the other performance management areas and report progress on that, whether it's in relation to TAM, but maybe not also necessarily.
Right. In relation to TAMP, and, if more is always greater, but yep.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And I also took, from your comments that as we progress through this, we need to become more devious in terms of how we come up with these quests for them to continue to be successful. So others will have to pick up on that. Someone named Matt. Does anyone named Matt out there want to report back on their group?
I'll go first. Matt Hardy, Matt, Dr. Matt, whatever, Ashto Matt. So we kind of had a quiet group. I'm not a quiet person. So I was trying to fill the time. Taraj and me from New Jersey are going to become best buds, I think, over the next 8 to 9 weeks. But the one that I think was most interesting was the one on the quest number 3. 4 key questions to ask when considering and integrating TAM with planning and programming. And that's when everybody was speaking up about the connection between maintenance and operations, and kind of how to get those people, those folks, I guess, to sort of talk, to the TAMP people sort of in general, and just generally trying to sort of connect maintenance with planning, not the planning department, but planning from an asset management perspective. And that can be challenging sometimes, because sometimes it seems like the maintenance and operations are more reactive as opposed to being more proactive from the asset management side. And then the other one that was interesting was the quest number 4 about linking. I think it goes back to what Jasmine was saying about linking asset management and performance. And I brought up, I thought it was interesting what Jack said about at Massachusetts about connecting their TAMP from that state of good repair perspective, from a reliability perspective. And if you apply it to transit, it seems like there's a strong connection between ensuring that your assets, your buses, your trains, your rail, whatever, are in a state of good repair to ensure a reliable transit system can operate on the system, on the infrastructure, and that might not be as strong of a connection on the roadside. So I thought that was sort of an interesting one, of connecting the mobility needs with the asset management needs. And that was kind of it.
That's great. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
And Matt, Matt.
Yes, the other Matt. Yeah, thank you. We had a great group. We had about 14 folks in the breakout room. Pretty some pretty robust discussion, and we didn't make it too far down the list, but had a really good discussion about the first few items that we did get a chance to work on. As we were kind of talking about the TAM policy, Bill mentioned some of the issues that were brought up, and that apparently are addressed elsewhere in the guide, which is good to know, and good information to kind of be thinking about, is that maybe there are some other sections of the guide that could address some of these issues that came up, because the same 2 issues came up in our group, related to the sort of financing side, as well as the how do we track and monitor performance. So definitely some good thoughts there on how we can look to other sections of the guide to also help answer some of these questions that were being brought up. We had some good conversation on the third one, or excuse me, on the second question, about the key ingredients. And really, I think a number of us kind of immediately gravitated to the idea of leadership, and I think had a good discussion about the important role of leadership, but also understanding that leadership is well, I kind of use the word fickle. I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, but they change, right? I mean, you get new leaders from time to time and different perspectives, and so it's important to have that leadership support, but then also to take action while you have it, because you may not in the near future. So we had some discussion about that. We also talked about, and that's not the case in our state, but I've seen that happen elsewhere, and actually in decades past, certainly has impacted us. The third question on the key questions for integrating planning programming, I think we kind of agreed that this idea of really accounting for the relationship between asset management and maintenance and operations is the one that's the most, they're all critical. All 4 of those items were pretty critical, but that's the one that's been the most vexing, and probably is the most important for us to try to see if we can make progress on. And that's probably why we have a couple of NCHRP projects that are related to those topics that are currently underway or in the process, because of the importance of that topic of maintenance and operations and kind of how it links. So anyway, some great conversation, excellent group, and want to thank everyone for their contributions.
Thank you, Matt. Much appreciated. And just I'll open it up if there's any other questions or comments before we pass back to Matt to wrap up. But I just wanted to say a thank you to those that presented today, to those of you that facilitated those discussions. Very much appreciated. I appreciate your efforts, and thank you for all those that participated. Matt, back to you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Gareth. Thanks to the SpyPond team and everything for helping it, for first off, writing the guide and everything. And second off, helping to put together the technical aspects of this webinar series. So this is concludes webinar number 2. Just want to say, so next week we have TAM webinar number 3 that we're going to look at life cycle planning and management. Same bat time, same bat channel. We'll have a couple changes for webinar number 4 and then webinar number 5, so just sort of take note of that. But we're doing them from 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. Eastern when we have them during the week. You go to tam-portal.com and you can register for them, go under events, and then look for the TAM webinar series. I'm looking at it right now. So thanks to everybody who attended. I do want to do two shout outs. The first one is for the upcoming TRB Transportation Asset Management Conference. If you're into TAM, I assume you're attending here. It's going to be held virtually August 10th through the 12th. You can, if you Google TRB TAM Conference 2021, it comes up. I think registration is going to open soon, but there are a lot of us online here that are putting together, I think, a very tremendous program in that virtual environment. Pros and cons to it, I think, but I think it's going to be a great event. And then look forward to an in-person one. The plan, I think, is in 2023. The other ask, and I'll be sending an email out for all the state DOTs out there. We are trying to collect copies of all the TAMP assessments that FHWA sent to your state DOT. If you'd be willing to share those with us, and we can post them on our TAM portal website. We'd love to do that so that others can learn from how others have been ranked and assessed, and that sort of thing. We think that there's positive benefits to that, but you as the state DOT have to be okay with us sharing that and sending that to me. So you'll be seeing an email, but if for some reason you have it handy and you want to send it to me, it's mhardy@ashto.org. Again, I want to say thanks to Steve Gay. Are you still on, Steve?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. So,
can I get my normal reminder?
Absolutely.
If Professor Hardy, I think this is your job too. Your homework assignment is before next week. Please take a look at the guides section dealing with life cycle planning and management. It may be good prep work for the discussion that's going to take place. I think that's the foundation of asset management in some ways. How do you manage that network of pavements and bridges for the long term? I'm excited about it. Back to you, Matt.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Yes, go do your homework assignment, which is to read, do some searching and everything. Look at the different chapters and subsections on life cycle planning and management, and be prepared to sort of talk about that next Wednesday from 2 to 3:30 p.m. So with that, I think it's 3:30. It's 3:29. I'll give you 1 minute back. Thank you very much, and we'll have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Bye. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.